more. Nope, that's not it. Well, welcome to reality. We're really glad you guys join in with us and share this time of study and time of singing and worship. We appreciate you so much. Thank you. A couple of announcements before we get started. We're going to do the teaching first, and then we'll have worship afterwards. We are aiming to be in person the first Wednesday of October. Right now, I don't know what that date is, but whatever is the first Wednesday of October, we are planning to meet in person.
Can I show the room?
Yeah, you can sure show them the room.
This is the room. Hi, Penny.
Hi.
Very nice.
Yeah. So, anyway, so there'll be more instructions coming. There'll be more instructions coming in the future. So, anyway, that's something that's coming. And so tonight we're going to do our study first, and then we'll do our worship time. I just want to start with a word of prayer. And let me ask that just for a moment that we just be quiet and still. I don't know what's going on around you, but if you can still yourself for just a moment, and then I'll voice a prayer for us, and then we'll get started tonight. Lord, I'm so grateful for the word that we have to study, this word that you have given us. I'm so thankful that we have you to teach us and instruct us in your truth, your ways. Lord, I know that this word is meant to help us learn what it is that you want to say to each one of us, each individual one of us. And so, Lord, I would ask that you would open our ears and open our hearts and help us receive the thing that you're wanting to communicate to us through this study tonight. Thank you for 1 Samuel. Thank you for the story of David. Bless this, Lord. Now, help me, because I can only speak to people's ears. But, Lord, you can speak to our hearts. And so come and make this what you would desire it to be. And I ask it in your name and for your sake. Amen. Thanks, beloved. Okay, now we're going to do something that's unprecedented tonight. And I said that right. We are going to cover 3 chapters. You heard me. Yeah.
Woo! How many chapters, Scott?
3. There you go. Okay. Now, the reason for that is because in chapters 24, 25, and 26, there is this theme that runs through them. And it means that we won't be able to cover everything in these 3 chapters, but we're going to watch this theme work its way out in these 3 chapters. The theme is this: a choice to make. In each chapter, David has a choice to make. And all of these choices that he's making in these chapters has something to do with making him the person that God is wanting him to be. And, you know, that really, I mean, choices shape the trajectory of our life. And choices are very, very important. So what we're going to see is these kinds of choices that David will make in these chapters will be shaping him and making him more and more into the king, the leader, the person, the man that God is calling him to be. So we're going to get started. I'm going to talk about the chapters a lot, and then we'll dive into various verses here and there and sort of tell the story and then check in with some verses. And then at the end of each chapter, what I'm going to do is talk about what I see as David's choice. And then at the end, what I'll do is I'll offer some questions for us to ponder. And by the way, I love presenting y'all with the questions. But let me just ask you that to consider that maybe sometimes it would be even more helpful if you would take my questions and make them better questions. So a challenge to you for that. Okay. So at the start of chapter 24, Saul once again is pursuing David, and again he's doing that with 3,000 selected men. Now that would mean that this is 3,000 soldiers that have some kind of notableness. I mean, they have made themselves notable somehow. So these are selected men, 3,000 selected men. Now you remember Saul was pursuing David. He was called away because the Philistines had invaded the land. He went to take care of that. Now he's back once again pursuing David. Now, during this pursuit, we are given sort of a clip of a scene where Saul leaves his men and basically what he's doing is he's going to the bathroom. Saul chooses a cave. Back then there wasn't porta potties or, roadside stops. So he chooses a cave and he takes his robe off in order for him to relieve himself. And this so happens to be, this is in chapter 24, this so happens to be the cave that David and his men, now remember David is about 600 men, this is the very cave that David and his men are hiding in further back in the cave. So, David's men, when they see this, David's men say this, it's verse 4. The men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of, when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish." And then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Now, so get this scene in your mind. Now, somewhere the men had heard that the Lord had said that his enemies would be placed into his hands. And so then when David's men start saying this, David decides that what he's going to do is he's going to creep over to where Saul is. But instead of assassinating Saul, what he does is he only cuts a piece of Saul's robe off and then he creeps back to his men. Now, the very fact that David just cuts a piece of Saul's robe off, it bothers him. And so then he says to his men, look at verse 6. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is anointed of the Lord." Now, when he's talking about being anointed of the Lord, what he's talking about is that Saul is where he is as king because God put him there. And so God forbid that I do anything against what God has done. That's what David is saying. So he persuades his men to not, his men said, well, we'll go kill him. And so he persuades his men not to kill Saul. Saul finishes his business and then he leaves the cave. And then in a little bit, David steps out of the cave and hollers. He lets Saul get some distance, and then he hollers at Saul. This is verse 8. Then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, "My lord the king." And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself, his face to the ground. And he said to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say, David is bent on harming you?" Okay, so here's what David said. David begins to ask Saul, why is he listening to liars who are saying that David wants to kill him? Why are you listening to those people? And then David declares, "I will not hurt the Lord's anointed." And there's that phrase again. In other words, I'm not going to try to undo what God has done. That's what he's saying. And then he shows evidence and proof of the truth of what he's saying, that I won't hurt the Lord's anointed. I had a chance to kill you, but instead what I did is I cut off a piece of your robe, and he waves that in front of Saul. Now go with me to verse 15. Verse 15, David says, "May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand." This is David finishing what he said to Saul. And in verse 16, when David finished saying this, Saul said, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" Now see, now he's been calling him the son of Jesse, which is kind of a one step back of saying anything about having a relationship with him. It's like, I want some distance from this person. Now he calls him David, my son, which is a very intimate statement. It would be a statement that a father would make to a son. And so what happens is Saul says, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" And he wept aloud. Verse 17, "You are more righteous than I," he said. "You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly." And then verse 19, skip down to verse 19. "When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed?" Yeah, it's just a rhetorical question. Of course not. Of course not, when a man finds his enemy. "May the Lord, but you did to me." In other words, you're not treating me like an enemy. So may the Lord reward you well for the way you have treated me today. Now, please understand, in this story, Saul he may be acting repentant, but repentant means that something has changed, and that will work its way out in behavior. And what we're going to find out is that in the future chapters, Saul's behavior doesn't change. And so what he's doing is he's showing remorse. He's not showing repentance. You know, it's like when I was little and I got caught, my mom kept cookies in a certain drawer. And I would sneak into the kitchen and I would open the drawer and I'd get me some cookies. And so then if I got caught, then, you know, of course I would be remorseful, but it wasn't like I was planning to make any changes, because the next time she wasn't in the kitchen where the drawer was that had the cookies, I planned to raid the drawer again. So that's remorse. That, you know, it's getting caught with your hand in the cookie drawer and being sorry that you got caught, not sorry for what you're doing. And so this is that same kind of thing. It's very interesting. In verse 20, he says this, "I know that you will surely be king." This is Saul speaking to David now. "I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands." So now Saul comes and he announces, he says, "I know that you're going to be king." And then verse 21, this would be a natural, if there was an acknowledgement of someone being king that's going to take my place, in that day and time, this would be a natural request. Now, verse 21, "Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not kill off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family." That typically was protocol, that when you took over a kingdom, what you did is you wiped out the family. So that what you were doing is you were making sure that you wouldn't get assassinated by the family that you're replacing. And so Saul is asking for that grace, that mercy from David. So this is how this ends. This is chapter 24. So what is the choice? Okay, at the end of the chapter, everyone goes their way. Okay, that's how the chapter ends. So what's the choice here? I think one of the things that we need to look at is how David gave respect to Saul, even though Saul was not giving him respect. And I think there was a choice here. It was The choice was not to rob anyone of their dignity, even if they're trying to rob you of yours. It was a choice. While someone is relieving themselves and you take a piece of their robe, that's embarrassing. That would be embarrassing. In other words, what David did was reduce the dignity of Saul. And then he felt bad about it. His conscience bothered him. And so the choice was then to own up to it. It became evidence of proving that he's not trying to kill Saul, which was very good. But at the same time, there was this desire of David's to not harm the man that God had put in that position as king. And so there is this need to honor the dignity of another, even when there's a choice to do that, even when that other is trying to rob you of your dignity. What a choice. What a choice. But I'll tell you, isn't that like Jesus? Isn't that like the one that we claim to follow? Is that he would not rob anyone of their dignity, even if they were trying to rob him of his. See, that's a choice to be like Jesus, is what this is. Now, think about this too. David could have ended all his troubles right there in that cave. All he had to leave his home, he had to leave his wife, on and on and on. Of all that he had to give up, he could have ended all of his troubles right there. But he made a choice to trust God with his troubles. In other words, not take his troubles in his own hands and try to solve them himself, but to trust God with his troubles. And part of that was part of this thinking that if God made him king, then God is the only one who can unmake him being king. If I try to do that, if I take what God has done and try to undo what God has done, then I'm doing something wrong. And so instead of taking his troubles into his own hands, he trusts God with his troubles. That was a choice. That was David's choice in chapter 24. Okay, now let's look at chapter 25. At the very beginning of chapter 25, there's just this statement to let us know sort of the climate of the spiritual life of the nation. And the statement is this: Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. And then David moved down into the desert of Paran. Now, so we're just giving this brief statement, and all that is just to let us know that the one who watched over Israel's spiritual life is now gone. There's a vacancy there, a vacuum, a spiritual vacuum in the country now. So then next the thing we read is that we begin to be introduced to this man named Nabal. Verse 3, it talks about this man who's very, very wealthy, and he's very, very rich, has all these kinds of things. And the reason we're being told this is because pretty soon we're going to be told that David has a relationship, a relationship, and kind of a professional relationship with this man named Nabal. Now, Nabal, the name, means fool, and he will live up to his name in this chapter, the story in this chapter. Now, we're told that the time for sheep shearing is come, and so they start shearing the sheep. And now this would mean that there would be reason to rejoice because the sheep have survived. This will make the man and all of his household. This will make them lots of money, and so. But what we aren't told here is that only until later on is that while the sheep were being shepherded, David's men helped watch over that, so that nothing could happen to the sheep, so that no one could steal the sheep, no one could harm the shepherds, and so that even like animals, like predators, couldn't steal and kill the sheep. So David's men protected this resource of Nabal's, and so there was to be expected, a natural expectation that there would be some kind of payment for this, that Nabal would share food and resources and provision with David and his men because of the help that they had offered. Now, if you look at verse 10 in chapter 25, we find that Nabal, David sends some men to collect basically some payment for the help that they had offered. And then verse 10 tells us Nabal's response to this request to be paid for the help that they had been given. Now, Nabal says this, Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their master these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?" Now see that? Basically what Nabal is doing is that he knows, David is a national hero. Remember, they made songs about David, okay? But Nabal is treating him like some lowly servant who is trying to run away from his master. And his master would be Saul's. Nabal is very aware of David being on the run from Saul. But what he does is he belittles David with this. Now, what happens when the men go back to David and tell him what Nabal had said, David gets so angry. He assembles 400 men, and he plans to go back and make Nabal pay for his insults. And basically what his plan is to come back and kill every male in Nabal's household. That would be servants, it would be helpers, it would be sons, it would be Nabal himself, on and on. Any male in Nabal's keeping would be killed. Now, we come to verse 14 and we hear this. One of the servants, this is in Nabal's house now, one of the servants told Abigail. Now, in the story, we're already told that Nabal is married to this lady. We're given the picture that she's very beautiful, but she's also very, very smart. One of the servants told Abigail, this is Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master our greetings, but he hurled insults on them." Okay, so now Abigail knows what's coming. She knows what's about to happen. So she starts making plans to interrupt David's return for vengeance of being insulted. Now, in an honor-shame culture, honor is everything. And when you have shamed someone, you have taken the thing that counts the most away from them. And there is often a reaction to that can be very violent. And that's what we're seeing happen here. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind, I'll come back to this here in a little bit. Abigail means, the literal translation of the name is Father of Joy. But what that means is source of joy. Okay? So this is the meaning. Source of joy is married to fool. That's what we're hearing here. Okay. But anyway, what she does is she puts together some provisions that were really what was owed to David. And then what she does is she gets on her donkey and then she rides to find David. And then when she finds David, we're now in verse 25. Verse 25 says this. She says to him, this is Abigail saying this to David, "Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my Lord sent. In other words, she didn't see the men, and so now she's wanting to make a correction. Now, move on down to verse, now she says in verse 28, please forgive your servant's presumption. Now, she's asking for forgiveness. She's pursuing David in order to make it right. Okay? Such a beautiful picture of what it's just like, beloved, I'm saying to college students all the time, they'll start talking about being frustrated or hurt, their feelings are hurt by something, and I can't quite tell if they're talking about me or they're talking about somebody else. And so when they're finished talking, I will say, now if I'm party to hurting you, or if I'm party of increasing your sadness, then I'm ready right now to ask for forgiveness and to do what I need to do to repair any harm that I have created. And it's just there's just this something that takes place of sort of taking a relationship and kind of righting it, kind of getting it set where it should be, where it needs to be, where God would want it to be. That's what forgiveness begins to offer. Okay. So she offers forgiveness, and then in verse 31, she says, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering. In other words, she's saying, please don't go and seek vengeance. That's what she's saying. Don't avenge yourself. Don't do this. Don't do any bloodshed, is what she's saying. And so in verse 31, she says, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. In other words, when you become king, is what she's saying, you won't have this blight on your story. So please don't do this. Now, what happens is David takes the gift and he blesses her for her judgment, her good judgment and discernment. And then he sends her on her way. Now, when we get to verse 36 in the story, Nabal now is, all the work has been done, and so Nabal now is just celebrating up a storm. Verse 36, when Abigail went to Nabal, she's returning back to the house, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk, so she told him nothing at all until daybreak. In other words, the next morning. But when she does tell him that next morning, what happens is that what's described for us is most likely he had a stroke. Because she tells him what she kept from happening. What David was on his way, and she stopped it. And so what happens is then he has a stroke. What sounds like a stroke. And then we're told 10 days later, he passes away. Now, one of the things that she had said to David, this is again part of verse 31, says, don't do this so that you have this burden of bloodshed on your conscience. And then she finishes, and when your Lord your God has brought my Lord success, when the Lord your God has brought my Lord, in other words, when God has brought you success, David, remember me. Remember your servant. So when Nabal passes away and he hears about it, David remembers her. And we're told that she becomes his wife. And then the chapter ends with telling us that there were other women as well that were his wife. That became his wife as well. But now, what about Michal, Saul's daughter, that David was married to before all of this began to happen between David and Saul? Well, Saul takes her and gives her to another man. So she no longer is David's wife anymore. Now, so what are the choices in chapter 25 that a choice to make? What was David's choice here? Okay, so here's one way to look at what David's choice was. He had the choice to become a fool because a fool treated him wrong. And doesn't that often happen? Someone treats me wrong and my response to them is really becoming just like them. So he had a choice to become a fool because a fool treated him wrong, or, now listen real carefully, or he could, the other side of the choice was he could listen to what joy had to say. Listen to the discernment joy could give. He could either become like the fool that made him angry, or he could listen to joy, the discernment of joy, and move in a different direction. You know, what I'm talking about is that he could become like Nabal, or he could listen to the counsel of Abigail. That was one of his choices. The other choice he had is you can make your reputation more important than being righteous. Do you know anyone like that? That like they'll do anything to rescue and save and make sure that their reputation looks good. They'll even do terrible things to make their reputation look good. It's like letting the reputation be more important than being righteous. Or here's the other choice of being righteous is more important than your reputation. In other words, one of the things that David chose was he let God defend his reputation. Now that, beloved, that's hard. There's been several times in my life when people they literally attacked my reputation. Now, and I had a choice to make. I had a choice to try to rise up and defend myself, or to let God defend my reputation. And I can't say that I've made the right choice every time, but those times that I made the choice to let God defend my reputation, I'll tell you the results. It took time, wasn't quick, but I'll tell you the results was so much better for God's kingdom than what I would have chosen to do. So that's chapter 25. Now let me run on to chapter 26, and then we'll bring this to an end. Okay, once again, the Zephites, these people have turned David over to Saul once before. Now here they are again, starting in chapter 26. They go to Saul and tell Saul where David is hiding. And so once again, Saul gathers up his men and he pursues David again. Now, what happens is that David someone tells David Saul is coming from, so he begins to watch Saul and his army, and so he sees that they have, for the night, they have built an encampment, and so then he wants to sneak into the camp, and he takes a young man with him, and the young man, they find Saul. Saul is kind of at the center of the camp, and there's other soldiers sleeping around him. We're given a name of the commander of the army. His name is Abner. Abner is really Saul's uncle. And so Abner now is named as one of the soldiers sleeping around Saul. They find Saul at the center of this with his spear stuck in the ground next to his head and a water bottle. And so the young man whispers to David, "Let me kill him. Let me take his spear and drive it through him one time. I won't do a bunch. I won't stab him a bunch. I'll just kill him with one stab of the spear." And David says no. But what they do is they take the spear and the water bottle. And then they get at some distance away, and then they wake everyone up. And what David does is he calls out to Abner, not to Saul, but to Abner. And in verses 15 and 16, what he does is he rebukes Abner. Listen to this. David said, he's talking to Abner now, "You're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your lord the king? Someone came to destroy your lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die, because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed." Well, I mean, he's really getting after Abner. And as this is going on, Saul hears David speaking, and he says, David, is that you? And Abner's going, who are you? Who is this? But Saul recognizes the voice and he says, David, is that you? And David says, yes. And so then David starts talking to Saul from some distance. I'm sure it's all dark. They don't know where David's at. And basically David says to Saul, listen, if God has instructed you to kill me, then let's get together and let's do a sacrifice to offer to God to make things right. But if God hasn't stirred you up to kill me, if you're being stirred up by people telling you lies, and they're telling you that I need to be killed, then let them be cursed. And basically what that means is let them be excommunicated out of the covenant community of Israel. Let them be cursed. And as Saul is listening to this, Saul then acknowledges back to David, I have been a fool. And once again, he shows remorse, but not repentance. Now, what was the choice here? What was this choice in chapter 26? Well, I think the choice was that David did not intentionally return evil for evil. He intentionally did not return evil for evil. But what he did is he tried to overcome evil with good. Now, this doesn't mean, please know, I want to be real careful here. This does not mean that you cannot defend yourself when you overcome evil with good. It isn't saying you don't, David walked off and was hidden in the dark, so that Saul couldn't reach him. And when he offered to give Saul back his spear and his water bottle, he had one of Saul's young soldiers come get it. He didn't want Saul coming to get it. So it doesn't mean you cannot defend yourself, nor does this mean that you have to put yourself in a vulnerable position. It just means that you intentionally not offer evil for evil, but you seek to overcome evil with good. Okay, beloved, let me end with some questions for us tonight. And again, I challenge you, take my questions and make them better ones. Okay? Okay, so is there someone in your life who needs to be treated with more dignity, even though they don't deserve it? Is there someone like that in your life? Now reflect, just get some reflection. Is there someone in your life who needs to be treated with more dignity, even though they don't deserve it? Is there anyone in your life you need to do a better job at defending their dignity? Let me repeat that. Is there anyone in your life you need to do a better job at defending their dignity? And how about this question? In what ways could you let joy guide you a little more and frustration a little less? In what ways could you let joy guide you a little more and frustration a little less? Okay, and here's another question. How might you need to worry less about your reputation and trust God more with it? How might you need to worry less about your reputation and trust God more with it? And then here's a question. I have 3 more questions. So this one I really wrestled with and struggled with. Please make this one better. But here's the question. Who might you need to be less concerned about their approval and more invested of being real with them? Who might you need to be less concerned about their approval and more invested in being real with them? Beloved, is there any place you need to stop defending yourself and let God defend you? Is there any place you need to stop defending yourself and let God defend you? And then lastly, Lord, beloved, right now in this season of your life, what would overcoming evil with good look like? Right now in this season of your life, what would overcoming evil with good look like? Well, beloved, that's the teaching tonight, and thank you for being a part of this. We're going to switch gears now and do some worship, and we hope that you stay with us. And enjoy it with us, and give us just a moment to kind of set up, and then we'll get to it. Thank you.
Really good, Scott.
Ooh, is there going to be enough room for you?
Yeah, man.
You sure there's enough room for that?
Yeah, baby. I like, when you were talking about the what Abigail had done, it just I like the language you use that when David was going to turn into the very thing that he was against.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if Abigail paused him.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what she did.
Yeah. And I just all the boneheaded times that I've not been paused, or I haven't paused,
Or wouldn't let somebody pause.
Yeah.
You're there, Scott Latham.
Yeah. Or wouldn't let somebody pause. And I thought, it reminded me of that three formula: pause, think, and pray. Before reacting. And the other thing I thought that was really cool was, I really think David would have got a 15-yard penalty for taunting whenever he had the spear.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, there's no reason why it can't be fun, right?
Yeah.
Not returning evil for evil. But I always get this image in my mind that he's like, "Woo! Here's your spear." Abner, you know where Saul's spear is? I got it right here in my hand, man. That would have been a penalty.
And we also know that spear was very precious to Saul, because all the time, from the moment he starts to try and kill David, it tells us Saul had a spear in his hand. It's just like, did he sleep with it? Did he eat with it? I mean, what? But it was just always there.
Yeah. I can't remember what the next to last question was, but golly,
How do you need to let God defend you?
Oh yeah, the reputation thing. That man. That's just what I hate most is being misunderstood.
Yes.
Man, that drives me absolutely batty crazy. And so, and you can ask people close to me that when I'm misunderstood, I will drive the point home, of what I was meaning to say. But I really feel like, Scott, there's a lot of reputation stuff behind that.
Yeah. Same here.
Being misunderstood.
Same here.
I mean, it'll be at the point where people are like, man, I won't even bring it up next time, that's how hard I hate it. So, good lesson. I can't wait for the Zoom after just to talk about those questions, So they're really good. Just praise God. You stood before creation, eternity in your hand. You spoke my life in motion, so now you stand. You stood before my failure and carried the cross of my shame. Sin weighed upon your shoulder, so now you stand. What can I say? What can I do? But offer this heart wondrous things to me. I am a child of God. You split the seas so I could walk right through it. All my fears were drowned in liquid love. You rescued me so I could stand and sleep. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. All my fears were drowned in liquid love. You rescued me so I could stand and sleep. I am a child of God, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. This is my desire to honor you, Lord, with all my heart. I worship you, and all I have within me, I give you praise. All that I adore is in you. Lord, I give you my heart, I give you my soul. I live for you alone. Every breath that I take, every moment I play. Lord, have your way in me.
This is my desire to honor you, Lord, with all my heart, all I have within me, give you praise. All that I adore.
Lord, I give you my heart, I give you my soul. I live for you alone. Every breath that I take, the moment I play. Lord, have your way in me. Lord, I give you my heart, I give you my soul. I live for you alone. Every breath that I take, the moment I'm away. Lord, have your way in me. Lord, have your way in me. Lord, have your way in me. Amen.
We're so glad you joined us for Scott's teaching and for our worship time. Now, if you'll please join us for Zoom afterwards, right now, for discussion. And thank you for being here. And we just pray that you have a blessed evening and a wonderful week.
Amen.
Amen. Love you guys.
Yeah.